So hi everyone, now we're going to be doing a nice little minimum slash maximum problem. So we've got the function, this is the function from our previous video, f of x is equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 plus 2 minus the square root of 2, everything times cosine x, plus the square root of 2 minus 2 times sine of x. We can just see that we can rewrite this part right here slightly differently. So namely we can factor out the minus right here. Okay, and inside the parentheses we'll have 2 minus the square root of 2. Okay, now we know how to do these sorts of problems. So let's first take the derivative of this function. So f prime of x will be the derivative of the right hand side. So the derivative of these constants is going to be 0. So now we can just write, and we know that the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x, so let's just put that in front. So minus 2 minus the square root of 2 times sine x minus 2 minus the square root of 2 times cosine of x. And since we're going to be needing the second derivative as well, what we should do right away, and what we will do right away, is take the second derivative of the function at the same time. So the second derivative will be negative 2 minus the square root of 2 times cosine x minus, or better yet, plus 2 minus the square root of 2 times sine x. Okay, now in order for us to find the extreme values, the first thing that we have to do is set the first derivative equal to 0. So we have to find the stationary points. Or in other words, when we do that, we'll get that minus 2 minus the square root of 2 sine x minus 2 minus the square root of 2 times cosine of x is equal to 0. Now, of course, we can just divide everything by negative 2 minus the square root of 2, and that will simply leave us with the equation sine x plus cosine x is equal to 0. Now, there are multiple ways to solve this equation, but I think probably the easiest way is to just square both sides. So that will give us that sine squared x plus 2 times sine x times cosine of x plus cosine squared of x is equal to 0. And let's notice that these two are just 1, and that this quantity here is the same as sine of 2x. So that means that we can transform this equation to be 1 plus sine of 2x is equal to 0, or in other words, 2x, or in other words, sine of 2x is equal to negative 1. So from here, we get that 2x must be equal to 3 pi over 2 plus 2k pi, where k is an integer, any integer. And now we can go ahead and divide both sides by 2, and that will give us that x is equal to 3 pi over 4 plus k times pi. So these are going to be all of our stationary points. However, notice that we can actually split this solution into two parts. One of these, so by drawing our circle, our unit circle, x and y, we see that one of our solutions is going to be this angle, and the other one is going to be this angle. So this part, this green part, will be 3 pi over 4 plus 2k pi, and this here part is going to be negative pi over 4, or 7 pi over 4. This red part is going to be 7 pi over 4 plus 2k pi. So we get this part right here. We get this part right here for odd values of k. So we get this part right here if k is equal to plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, etc. And we'll get this value right here for k is equal to 0, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, etc. Okay, now that we've established that, let's go ahead and plug in each of these values into our second derivative. So we can write that as f double prime of x when x is equal to 3 pi over 4, and when you insert the numbers, you'll simply get that whoops, went a little too far back there. And when you put in 3 pi over 4, you'll get that here it is. So minus 2 minus the square root of 2 minus 2 minus the square root of 2 times cosine of 3 pi over 4 plus 2 minus the square root of 2 plus 2 minus the square root of 2 times the sine of 3 pi over 4. Okay? So the cosine of 3 pi over 4, is simply going to be negative square root of 2 over 2, and the sine of 3 pi over 4 is going to be positive square root of 2 over 2. Or when you do all of the math, you'll get the value that f double prime when x is equal to 3 pi over 4 is equal to 2 times the square root of 2 minus 2 which is greater than 0. So that means that our function has a minimum, has actually many minima at x is equal to 3 pi over 4 plus 2k pi. Okay? So, and let's go ahead and calculate one of those minimums. We can just plug in 3 pi over 4. So, I'll just write it as f minimum of x is equal to f of 3 pi over 4 which is equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 times minus, whoops, 2 minus the square root of 2, and we're plugging that value into our original function, not into any of the derivatives, of course. So plus the square root of 2 minus 2 times the square root of 2 over 4 over 2, which is just the cosine of 3 pi, which is, the negative cosine. I flipped the signs right here, times the square root of 2 over 2 plus the square root of 2 minus 2 times the square root of 2 over 2, and that is equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 plus 2 minus the square root of 2, and that is exactly equal to 4 minus 3 times the square root of 2, and that's approximately negative 0.243. So we say that the minimum value of this function is equal to 4 minus 3 times the square root of 2. Okay, so we found our minimum value. Now let's go ahead and do the maximum value. Actually see whether or not we get the maximum value. So first of all, let's plug in, let's say 7 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4 into our first derivative. Into our second derivative. So f double prime of x, which is equal to 7 pi over 4 in this case, is equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 minus the square root of 2 over 2 minus the square root of 2 over 2, and this is just the same as 2 minus 2 times the square root of 2, and this is obviously less than 0. So that means that the function has maxima, that's plural of maximum, at x is equal to 7 pi over 4 plus 2k pi. And yet again, k is an integer. Okay, so let's go ahead and now calculate the maximum value. So f max of x, which is the same as f of x is equal to 7 pi over 4, is equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 plus plus 2 minus the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 over 2, and plus 2 minus the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 over 2, and that's going to be equal to 2 minus the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 2 minus 2, and that's the 2's cancel out, and that's just going to be the square root of 2. So f max of x is equal to square root of 2. So this is the function's minimum value, and this right here is the function's maximum value. So basically, we conclude this video with this answer. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, leave a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.